Hello and welcome to Tech Inspire Canada. I'm Diana Liu, head of the technology vertical in Canada for LinkedIn Marketing Solutions. I'm so excited for you to hear from our incredible panel of speakers today. At LinkedIn, our mission is to help professionals become more productive and successful. And we hope that coming out of today's session, you'll take away information and insights that will do just that. I'd love to start every event sharing our why, our vision at LinkedIn, and it's to create equitable economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And we're doing this through creating the world's first economic graph, a digital representation of the global economy. I think there are few things that are as important as economic opportunity for individuals, especially now when the world and the world of work is rapidly changing. We believe that by building this economic graph will allow all forms of capital, human, working, intellectual, to flow to where it can best be leveraged. And the hope is that in doing so, we lift and transform the global economy. I want to thank all of you for being members. I hope you're members of our platform and contributing to LinkedIn's ecosystem because all of you are helping us realize this vision. So thank you. So now let's take a look at what we have in store for you today. We'll start the day with our B2B tech trends and two of my favorite people, John Lombardo and Peter Wemberg. You're going to love this session. We're going to follow that by a quick break to let everything they said sink in. From there, we'll cover insights from our technology marketing in the age of agility research with the amazing Tiffany Heipel. And then we'll move over to our account-based marketing fireside chat with our esteemed guests. And then a quick close and recap. Before we dive in, I want to highlight a few housekeeping details for all of you. We'll be sending out the full recording after the event, so look out for an email from our team. We're doing a raffle at the end of each speaker session. Yeah, so make sure you're present because you have to be present to win. And then lastly, please take a minute at the end of the event to fill out our brief survey. We want to know what you thought of the content and how we can continue to make these even better and more impactful for you. And with that, I will turn it over to the amazing John and Peter to kick us off.
Wow, technical difficulties. You'd think after a year in Zoom, I'd know what I'm doing, but I don't.
Yeah, John, you got to go off mute. There's a mute button, and if it's mute, people got to unmute. Yeah.
I mean, this is just, that was just horrific. I apologize. Peter, how are you doing? Hopefully better than I was just doing.
I'm embarrassed to be associated with you right now, but in general, I'd say I'm doing well. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, in case anybody's curious, Peter, the guy there on the left, he's the one who made the technical mistake. And then John, that's me. I was the one who definitely did not make the technical mistake.
Yeah, I try to mute you wherever possible.
Yeah, well, I can understand. Well, Peter, good to see you. I'm going to obviously bring you back in maybe 30 minutes or so. But for now, I'm going to get into the content that we have for you today. All of you, welcome. Peter and I put together these tech trends over the course of, honestly, the last couple of years. And when we've always tried to take a contrarian bent, a contrarian view of what marketers should be thinking about and investing in. And a lot of it comes from actually this idea here on the right called the contrarian matrix. As you know, these are trends for the contrarian marketer. And the contrarian matrix, I think, is a really valuable mental model for understanding how to either invest personally or invest professionally. What you can see is whenever you're thinking of any decision, you can be right or you can be wrong. We all learn at a really young age, being wrong is just wrong. It does not matter whether you're consensus, doing what everybody else is doing, or whether you're contrarian, doing it by yourself. Wrong is just wrong. The mistake most people make, though, as they get older, especially as they operate in a commercial environment, is there's often a need to do what everybody else is doing, to do what your competitors are doing. And so they think it's fine to do what everybody else is doing. That's called consensus. And then they think it's okay to be right in consensus. But in fact, there's no advantage there. If you do what everybody else does, it's a well-known fact that competition essentially ruins profitability. So you do not want consensus, because another word for consensus is competition. What you're really looking to do is to find the unique idea, the different idea, the contrarian idea that's also right. And this trends presentation has three big themes that we believe are all contrarian and right. And the reason we always frame it in the way that you're seeing around contrarian consensus is the number one question we likely get when we do any sort of presentation to marketers is, what is everybody else doing? And it's an interesting question. It's just the consensus and wrong question. The contrarian and right question is not, that. It's actually, what is nobody doing? And how do I know that that's right? And once you know that it's contrarian and right, that's what you want to invest in. As I mentioned, we've been doing trends literally for the last 5 years. We've got 30 different trends we've produced around all sorts of different topics, from segmentation to creative to distribution to measurement. We've got ideas about physics, and we've got ideas about magic, and ideas about gambling, and ideas about horse racing, and ideas about neuroscience. We've got lots of ideas. They're all really fun and entertaining. But today, we're only going to give you the three big ones, the three macro trends that we think are extremely durable and extremely contrarian. We feel you can absolutely invest in these ideas for the next 10 years at least. The ideas are the war on brand, which I'm going to take you through. Peter is then going to walk you through blockbuster marketing and death of hyper-targeting. Please ask questions. We're going to take questions at the end. But the point of being contrarian is also that the presentation is fun, it's challenging. You ought to disagree with some of the things that we're saying. And we'd like you to pick those battles with us, to pick those fights with us at the end. So we will engage you here with some challenging contrarian ideas, and then we'll hope to work out the final details in court at the end. Without further ado, we will talk about, in my opinion, the most important trend in the broader marketing advertising world right now, which has to do with brand building. So this is called the war on brand. And you can see there are swords that are fighting for dollar signs. And that's a pretty good encapsulation of what we're talking about. So we really stay with this contrarian consensus concept. The consensus view and wrong view, we would say in the industry today, is that sales activation is the future. That lead generation is the future, that there's going to be more account-based marketing and more personalization and more hyper-targeting. That's the consensus and wrong view. We would say the contrarian and right view is the opposite. It's not sales activation or bottom of the funnel that matters. It's actually top of the funnel that matters. And so we'll move forward with that belief. We'll just start by establishing that there are two types of marketing, and it's important to talk about them and essentially distinguish between the two. So there is the type of marketing that everybody in tech seems enamored with and investing all of their time and money and energy in, and that's sales activation or lead generation. And that's the kind of marketing that may get you a sale in the short term, but really doesn't do much for you in the long term. And then there's the opposite type of marketing. This is called brand building or brand advertising. It is a little bit less effective in the short term, but incredibly effective over the long term. And really all brands are built using brand building more than they are built using sales activation, but we seem to have forgotten that in recent years. There's a really nice piece of research from two marketing effectiveness researchers in the UK called Les Binet and Peter Field. They established this concept called the 60-40 rule, which has achieved quite a bit of fame over the last, let's call it 10 to 12 years. And it's simply, what they did is they looked at this database they have called the IP Databank. They tried to understand, which companies are growing fastest, not just in the short term, but also the long term. And they found this really reasonable conclusion, which is balance works really well. You shouldn't invest all of your money in lead generation. You shouldn't invest all of your money in brand advertising. In fact, a balanced approach works best. The interesting part of the balance, though, is I would say it's quite different from what most marketers are doing today. It recommends 60% of the money get invested at the top of the funnel, brand advertising, and only 40% the bottom of the funnel for lead generation. And you've got to build demand before you can capture demand, or create demand before you can capture demand. These things are sequential. You literally have to do one before the other. Most marketers today forget they need to create demand. They think they can just capture demand. And that may work for 1 year, but it doesn't work in years 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And so a short-term focus may not kill you in the short term, but it will absolutely kill you in the long term. Always good to see data that confirms some of these maybe outlandish statements we're making, but they're really not all that outlandish because the data says these statements are not all that outlandish. There's no question that marketers are hyper-focused on the short term. We ran an ROI study looking, asking questions about 4,000 marketers globally. And we just wanted to understand some simple stuff about time horizon. And we found two statistics, which I'd like to share with you. One is that only 4% of marketers actually measure their marketing beyond 6 months. And we know that most brand advertising predominantly takes effect 6+ months in the future. So nobody's measuring the long term, which means they cannot attribute any value to the long term, which means they do not invest in the long term. It's a catastrophic mistake. A similar way to think about this is, do companies run CPC campaigns or CPM campaigns? CPM campaigns are generally run on a reach basis and are trying to reach future buyers to harvest future cash flows. Nobody's really doing that. Everyone's running on a CPC basis, trying just to get the immediate sale. And so both of these data points indicate nobody's thinking long-term, nobody's investing in brand advertising, much to my dismay, and certainly to the dismay of your future cash flows. So as we say here, marketers, brand marketers in particular, are losing the budget battle. We're going to go through the case for brand advertising today. We're going to look specifically at what things activation or sales activation or lead generation does well, and then we're going to look at what brand building does well. And activation or lead generation, it does deliver short-term sales. That's the primary benefit. Interestingly, but lesser known, brand advertising also delivers short-term sales. There's some really great single source studies on this that show if you see an ad, you often will go buy something. And the ad didn't have to say buy now or give me your email. It just reminds you the brand exists, and then you go buy it at a future date. So, you might say, well, brand doesn't work as well as lead gen in the short term, but actually that wouldn't necessarily be true. They're much more balanced or equal in that way than you'd think. But brand does a whole bunch of other things. It generates long-term sales. It gives you pricing power. It helps you move into new categories. It helps you acquire talent. Everybody says talent's the number one operating priority. Well, if that's true, then brand advertising is for you. And then we finally got this idea of moat, which I won't get into, but I will tell you when we get there, there's sharks involved and lasers and piranhas. So hopefully that keeps you enticed. Let's now just look at some data on what brand does to benefit short-term sales. We have a bunch of customers and we've run simple campaigns with them where they just run lead gen advertising, say buy now, register now, something like that. Just, short-term focus. We've also looked at those same campaigns where we add in some brand building. So it's not just buy now, it's here's who we are, here's what we do, 50% of it, then the other 50% of it is buy now. And we find that the blend of brand and acquisition actually makes short-term sales basically 6x, or you get 6x the return in short-term sales. So, again, brand is an extraordinary benefit even to short-term sales, which is not something it generally gets credit for. So that's benefit number one. We'll move on to benefit number two. This is the one people are more commonly attribute to brand, which is the future cash flows generated by future buyers. Most marketers today are thinking of a specific mental model, which is the funnel, right? Maybe the most common mental model in all of marketing, all of advertising, top of funnel, bottom funnel. We like to flip the funnel, and we are more focused on what we call in-market and out-market. We have done some research recently with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute down in Adelaide, Australia. And we found that actually in-market, out-market is a better way to think about it because it's more customer-centric. A customer doesn't say, am I at the top of the funnel or the bottom of the funnel? A customer either has a need and they're in-market to buy a cybersecurity solution, or they do not have a need. And so they're not yet in-market, they're out-market. We actually found with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute that somewhere between 80 to 95% of buyers are actually out market and are not going to buy in the next year or 2 years. Only maybe 5 to 20% of folks are actually in market at any given time. So the customer-centric view tells you you shouldn't run all of your money in lead gen campaigns because most people are not in market. You should be running a lot more money in brand advertising campaigns because that's where most people are. They're out market and they need to be primed to buy in the future. So the more customer-centric view is in market, out market. This also works really well for conversations with the CFO. One of our favorite ideas is simply that sales and basically marketing talks endlessly about needing to align with sales. And I think that's much less interesting and much less important than the need of marketing to align with finance. And what a finance director or what a CFO cares about are cash flows, because any public company is valued on the sum of its future cash flows. And again, if you think about the research we did with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, the same conclusion is true. Very few of the cash flows are in the current period. Maybe only 20% are in the next year or two. 80% of the cash flows are in years 3, 4, 5, 10, 20. So whether you think of it from a customer-centric view or a CFO-centric view, you really shouldn't be focusing as much on the short term as the long term. Yet we just don't see many marketers, especially tech marketers, taking that view of the balance in their marketing budgets. Let's look at benefit 3, pricing power. This is Warren Buffett's favorite idea. He says the single most important attribute to consider in a business is pricing power. And we'll talk a little bit about why pricing power is so important. This graphic comes from one of our favorite professors, a gentleman named Mark Ritson. If you don't already know Mark Ritson, I encourage you to go read his columns at Marketing Week or to take his mini MBA. He is as educational as he is entertaining, a very rare talent on the Zoom screen. So what Ritson likes to walk people through is if you make a 1% change in the 4 things you see here, price, sales volume, fixed costs, variable costs, he likes to show you what the corresponding change in profitability is. You can see if you make a 1% increase in your prices, you actually get a 10% increase in profitability. That's enormous. Sales volume, a 1% increase, actually only get a 3% increase in profitability because there's lots of actual things you have to do, like pay people more in terms of quotas or produce more of the product. And so it actually decreases profitability. Fixed costs and variable costs are similar. You actually have to do physical things. So you don't get as big a profitability increase for a 1% decrease. And so the key idea here is that raising prices is kind of like magic. You literally don't have to do anything other than change some ones and zeros in a database, and you get a 10% increase in profitability. Whereas sales volume, fixed costs, variable costs, it's not magic. It's not an illusion. It's actual reality. And reality is a lot less profitable than illusion. So this is the magic trick. Raise your prices. Benefit 4, optionality. Nokia. We all know Nokia. We often don't know the history of Nokia, though. So the key idea here is that categories will die, but brands will live forever. It's a very exciting, pithy one-liner. Encourage you to use it at home tonight. So what does it tell us? It actually tells us the story of Nokia. Nokia was a paper mill back in 1894, cutting edge, literally technology back in 1894. But of course, the business wasn't going to ultimately just be a lumber business. And so they realized, hey, we're using all of this electricity to cut this lumber. It seems like we are also developing a core competency in electricity. Let's start a power plant. So most people don't know that Nokia branched into a new category, which was power planting. Still in the world of vegetation, but just a little bit different. And that electricity, again, they have this core competency in electricity. Where is electronics going? It's going to things like phones. And so when you have a strong brand, it becomes very easy to go from being a paper mill to a power plant to being a phone manufacturer, now to being a 5G provider. But if you have a strong brand, you can survive and you can jump categories, leave declining categories, enter growing categories. If you do not have a strong brand, it's virtually impossible. So brand building gives you optionality. It gives you options. It helps you avoid certain death. And this is something that, in particular, again, your CFO will care about because CFOs want many streams of revenue, not just a single stream of revenue. And brand helps you to do this. Talent. The funny thing here is to note Sally's LinkedIn profile where she says ex-LinkedIn, ex-Apple. And you can see this often on LinkedIn that people will leave a company, but they will never leave a brand. And that tells you a lot about the value, the status value, the signaling value of brand and how valuable it is, of course, to the individual. And we don't just see this on profiles, we see this in our data. We see that when potential candidates see marketing from a company, they become more familiar with the company. And then in the future, they're more likely to respond to a hiring inquiry. So if you want to hire the best talent, you've got to prime them with brand building, reach a broad group of people, explain to them who you are, what you do, why it's valuable. If you do that, you'll be able to hire them, and they will often take less money because you can pay them part in salary and part in status. So there are lots of reasons from a profitability and an organizational perspective that you should be investing in brand. It does help talent acquisition. And then finally, I promised there's moats. This is the second Warren Buffett idea. And Buffett essentially says, you want to think of a brand like a castle. You want as big a moat as possible to surround it to keep competitors from breaching the moat. So ideally you'd fill it with things like lasers and piranhas and crocodiles and sharks. And the best brands have these enormous moats that are almost impossible to breach. Think about Coca-Cola. They've got these trademarks, this custom script, the shape of the bottle. They've got Santa Claus, the polar bears, always refreshing, all of these ideas that are trademarked and literally cannot be copied. So you cannot cross the moat. You cannot copy. And that's why Pepsi's blue and Coke is red. And this stuff seems like it's only relegated to the world of CPG or B2C, but trademarks are just as valuable in the world of B2B. Geico has a B2B business. They have the gecko there, which is a powerful trademark. Salesforce has this character Astro, which is a powerful piece of IP, a powerful trademark. So think a lot about how do you actually make it illegal to copy your brand? You mostly do that by building strong IP, building strong intangible assets. So I've given you the entire case here for the value of brand. Short-term lead generation does one thing for you. Brand building does 6 things for you. I don't think the math needs to get any more complicated than that. We've also done this research with Peter Field and Les Binet, and we looked at how the blend between, brand and activation works in B2B. And we find that most people today are still investing too much money in the bottom of the funnel. It should be more like 60, 40, 70, 30, but we still see it's at 54, 46. So B2B marketers are not necessarily following the evidence like they should. And if we look at some online only businesses, we actually get a peek into the future or a window into the future. And those businesses, they essentially spend almost 80% of their money on brand building, because in the end, the internet makes it really easy for you just to go buy the product or service yourself. So if I can make you aware of my product or service, you'll basically do the sales activation of the lead generation yourself. And so some people say brands are dying. We would say that's completely false. Brands are only getting stronger. And 5, 10, 20 years in the future, brands will be even stronger than they are today. So brand is becoming more important, not less important. This is a very simple way to think about how in the world of tech you might adopt this 60-40 strategy. Salesforce, probably the best example of it. Peter will be talking about Salesforce a bunch going forward, but they have their 40% activation, which is simply download now, respond now, buy now. And you see that here on the left. And then on the right, they have brand ads, which are really just explaining, hey, here's the categories we operate in, here's what we do, here's how it can be valuable to you. But these character driven ads are much less about substance and much more about, kind of entertainment. So you've got this big character here, Astro, and Astro is kind of like Mickey Mouse, or Astro is like the Geico gecko. He is taking a really common, really just proven idea that works well in B2C marketing or in Hollywood, and just porting it into the world of B2B marketing. And it's done wonders for the brand awareness numbers and brand salience numbers at Salesforce. So this is what we consider best in class. So that was the war on brand. We're losing the war on brand, but all the evidence says we shouldn't be. Peter.
Thank you, John. How inspiring. It had everything: sharks, piranhas, pricing power, Warren Buffett. All in one place. Just incredible. It's great to see you. Also, so you see, I was on mute and then I took it off mute. So now people can hear me, but we can practice that together.
Standing on the shoulders of muted giants, Peter, as I like to say.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one, John. Yes, I'm excited to talk to you about blockbuster marketing. So I think John gave you kind of like the big macro trend in the industry, which is the increasing importance and value of brand building in B2B. What I'm really going to talk about are the 2 building blocks of effective brand building, which is really creative and distribution. So our first trend is about creative, then we'll move into distribution. As with John, I'm just going to start with the contrarian take for you here. So I think if you look at how the industry talks about creative, you hear a lot about real-time marketing. You hear a lot about test and learns. John and I have the opposite opinion for you, which is that the future is not on little real-time ideas. It's about making huge concentrated bets on very old ideas. And we're going to explain the theory through a metaphor. We're going to talk about a company that really understands how to create amazing creative and how to monetize it. So, if we want to understand how to do creative right, it makes sense to look at the company that does it the best. And for our money, that is the Walt Disney Corporation, perhaps the greatest creative enterprise in human history. And I think what we hope to demonstrate for you is that, you may think creative is just some kind of magical thing, lightning in a bottle. You just have to get lucky. We don't share that opinion. I think our opinion is that, yes, there's no way to guarantee good creative, but there are these kind of like core principles you can follow that will increase the likelihood of you developing effective creative. They work for Disney, they can work in B2B, and they work for Salesforce, which is going to be an example we use throughout the trend. Let's start with the first principle, which is the idea of making very big bets. I think a lot of us in business and in marketing think making a huge concentrated bet is very risky, much safer to just make a bunch of small little bets and then hope one of them works. Hollywood and Disney has learned that that's actually not true. It's actually the other way around. Small bets are extremely risky because they never cut through or make any money. Big bets, sometimes they flop, but generally speaking, you're a lot more likely to get very big returns. That's what you see here in this chart. So this is basically the returns of different Hollywood movies. And you can see how much money the movie costs to produce in terms of creative and distribution, and how much money the movie made for the studio. And what you see is that these little bets, you might win an Academy Award or something, but you don't actually make any money for the studio. It's the huge blockbuster films, the Harry Potters and the Batmans of the world. Those are the ones that really cut through and get you, put in $1, get $6 back. So big bets actually much less risky than small bets on a risk-adjusted basis. What does this mean in terms of your creative? I think most of the clients we work with, they just have too many things going on, too many little creative fires going on. You actually need concentrated creative concentration, big bets on big franchises. Salesforce, I think, has done this very well. We are like unpaid salespeople for Salesforce. We're huge fans of their marketing organization. At the top of the funnel, you saw that Trailblazers campaign John showed you. That's cost countless billions of dollars. Huge bet Salesforce has made over many years. At the middle of the funnel, you could call it, when it comes to content marketing or thought leadership, Salesforce isn't creating like a million little blog posts about whatever's going on in the moment. They're pouring huge amounts of resources into these big blockbuster reports, like their state of sales, state of CRM, state of service. Basically, for every big line of business, they have a big blockbuster report. So it's not necessarily about lightweight real-time ideas. It's about big bets on things you can do over and over again. Which brings me to my next principle, which is the idea of surprising familiarity. Generally, old ideas are more likely to succeed than new ideas, despite our obsession with new ideas in the marketing industry. Here are the highest grossing films of all time. Everything in blue is either a prequel, a sequel, or a remake, right? The only two exceptions are the Titanic movie, which would have been very hard to make a sequel of Titanic because the boat sank at the end, and Avatar. So basically, if you're not James Cameron, you need to make a sequel, a prequel, or a remake. And this is actually just like an evolutionary concept, which is that people, humans, like things that are kind of old, kind of new, but mostly old. So like Fast and the Furious 7, it's an old franchise. You're familiar with the previous 6 movies, but it's not exactly the same. It's the 7th one, so it's slightly new. So Hollywood has sort of achieved this incredible balance between old and new, and these ideas that are surprisingly familiar. I think you need to do that as well when it comes to your creative. You need to mostly be doing the same thing slightly differently every single year. Again, Salesforce. You can see they're sticking with Astro. Maybe Astro's doing new things in the creative, but generally speaking, a lot of it stays almost exactly the same. You can see those big reports they do them in 2015, 2016, 2017. I don't need to go list all the years since 2015. You get the idea. The point is they do it every single year. And each version builds on the equity of the past version. If you don't do this, if you just start from scratch every year, then basically you're taking all your past marketing spend and you're throwing it in the garbage, right? Instead, this is like compound interest. Every year, the franchise gets more and more famous, and so it gets more and more successful and easier to market, right? Next trend is called distinctiveness. This is a core idea that John and I are very into these days. I guess the simplest way to explain is that you got to look like yourself and no one else. And that differentiation is actually created at a kind of like shallow visual level. So like if I show you Buzz Lightyear, you know we're talking about Pixar movies. If I show you Captain Marvel, you know we're talking about the Marvel universe, not the DC universe. If I show you an X-Wing, you know we're talking about Star Wars, not Star Trek. So these things are differentiated, again, at the kind of visual level. The biggest source of waste in advertising is not reaching the wrong person. It's that most people who see a piece of comms, whether it's an ad or a billboard or a website, they don't actually know what brand is behind the comms. So they see a great ad, maybe they love it, maybe they remember it, they just can't remember who ran it. And no matter how you think advertising works, if it doesn't get attributed to the brand, it can't possibly work. Because the whole point, which John talked about, is building a memory of the brand that will come to mind when you're in a buying situation in the future. Salesforce, best in class. All of their ads, they've got this two-tone blue thing. They've got the weird feral raccoon child whose name's Astro. They've got the Salesforce logo prominently placed on every ad. You need to think about, what are your brand's distinctive assets? What are the visual things, colors, characters, logos, taglines that are truly ownable for your brand? And you need to make sure they're hard coded in every piece of comms that ever goes out the door, right? So that you get 100% of people know where the ad came from. Final thing I'll talk about is total merchandising. This is probably what Disney is most famous for. It's their genius strategy where, when Disney has a piece of IP that really breaks through, like Star Wars, it's not just a movie, it's an action figure, it's a lunchbox, it's a ride at Disney World, it's video games, it's the same IP everywhere. That's actually where the money comes from for Star Wars. This is probably my all-time favorite infographic, I've got to tell you, which is the profits of Star Wars by channel. And you can see like the Star Wars movies are basically just advertisements for Star Wars toys, which is where all of the money comes from. So everything is marketing something else and reinforcing the brand in every different channel. Now the Millennium Falcon's gonna fly off, I think at 11 parsecs, or is it 14 parsecs? That's embarrassing. I can't remember. But what does this have to do with B2B? Well, a lot of marketers are like, oh, every channel's different. We got to have bespoke creative for bespoke channels. That's not what Salesforce does. Salesforce has the same creative and they just pump it out in every single channel. They've got it in traditional media. They've got it in digital media on LinkedIn. They use it in their earnings reports. They use it at Dreamforce. Astro is everywhere. So every touch point is reinforcing another touch point. I'm not saying everything is exactly the same. Obviously, there's some nuances even in what the formats are. But by and large, these things are mostly the same, not different. And that's how they create, again, compounding brand equity. So that is blockbuster marketing, an idea near and dear to our heart. Big bets on old franchises. That is the most profitable strategy, whether you are trying to make a movie or trying to build a B2B brand. Final trend is the death of hyper-targeting, very disturbing trend. We got wars, we got death, not necessarily the most uplifting presentation, but that's just not our style. We're from New York. The death of hyper-targeting is really about media and distribution. So again, let me just frame this in terms of the consensus opinion and the contrarian opinion. Consensus opinion in marketing industry is quite clear. It's all about hyper-targeting. You hear endlessly about how hyper-targeted we can be, hyper-personalization, hyper-segmentation, hyper this, hyper that. Let us give you the contrarian take, which is that hyper-targeting is not the future of our industry. The future is actually broad targeting, and that's the most profitable strategy in B2B and B2C. So again, over the past 10 years, it's all about hyper-targeting. Everyone's like, I got to reach the CIO in Manitoba at the pharmaceutical company with 10,000 employees, right? Everyone's trying to go more and more niche over time. I think what you're going to see over the next 10 years is a move towards broader targeting. And let me be clear, that means something very different in B2B and B2C. I think you can think of targeting as a kind of spectrum from super broad, which is like everyone on the planet Earth, to super niche, which is the CIO in Manitoba. And I think what you're going to see is both of these things are getting more relaxed over time. For B2C, ad targeting in many cases doesn't actually make any sense, and you do just need to reach everyone in the world if that's who can buy your product. B2B, generally these are niche products. It's not like anyone can buy a cloud computing solution from Amazon. So you do still need some level of targeting, but you don't necessarily need hyper targeting. You need what we would call broad targeting or category reach, which I will define in a second. But first, let me attempt to kind of like prosecute the case against hyper-targeting. Let me tell you why hyper-targeting gets John and I really fired up and why we're really not a big fan of the idea of hyper-targeting. As we see it, there's kind of like 5 fatal flaws in hyper-targeting. And I think the through line here, before I walk you through all 5, is just that hyper-targeting is based on a lot of assumptions. And as a general rule in life, the more assumptions you make about something, the more likely you are to be wrong. There's a very fun thought experiment on this, which is basically like, let's say you have 2 decisions. One is based on 3 assumptions, one is based on 30 assumptions. If, decision 1, each assumption has a 99% chance of being true, then you only have a 3% chance of being wrong. With the 30 assumptions or variables, it jumps to 27%. So every assumption you make increases the odds that you make the wrong decision. So now let's talk about some of the assumptions behind hyper-targeting. I think the first assumption is just that it's possible. I think marketers think we have this incredible data that allows us to reach everyone with laser precision all across the internet. That may be true of first-party data. I'd say it's a very unsafe assumption when we're talking about third-party data. Here is a recent academic report from Group M, MIT, and the Melbourne Business School. Highly recommend. Basically, the researchers just set out to test the accuracy of programmatic data, and they focused on the most commonly used targeting facets in B2C, which are things like age, gender, location. So how accurate is gender targeting in B2C? It's accurate 50% of the time, which is kind of hilarious, right? It means you could literally replace your programmatic data with flipping a coin and you'd see no decrease in performance. So we think we're getting this hyper-targeting accurate data, but in most cases, it's junk data. As far as I know, no one has ever tried to test the accuracy of third-party B2B programmatic data. But I would say if we can't get gender right half the time, what is the likelihood that you really have accurate data on this CIO in Manitoba at the pharmaceutical company? By the way, I hope there's no CIOs at pharmaceutical companies from Manitoba in here. I don't mean to pick on you. It's just a random example I'm using. Just want to clarify that. So that's the first assumption. Now let's talk about the second assumption. Even if you have really good data, and there certainly is good B2B data sets out there, even if you have really good data, there's a bunch of other problems with hyper-targeting. The first is just that hyper-targeting assumes that everybody stays in their job and never changes jobs. And so we just need to reach them based on what they're currently doing with no thought to what they might be doing in the future. But that's not true, of course. People do change jobs. People move between segments. And broad targeting is the only way to account for that kind of change. So let's say you're trying to sell ads. You need to target the marketing director, but most of us know there's also a committee behind almost every B2B decision. So you also need to reach the IT decision maker that's going to approve the marketing software. You need to reach the CFO, who, as we all know, secretly runs the marketing department. And in the short term, maybe these are the 3 people you really need to reach. The thing is, if you're trying to close a deal, let's say a year or 2 from now, and John talked about the importance of thinking about future growth, future cash flows from future buyers, you actually need to think about the types of people who will be in those jobs in the future. And right now, the marketer, may be at an agency. The senior IT decision maker might be a junior IT specialist. They haven't gotten promoted yet. They'll be promoted in a year or 2. We see this in our data. We have probably the best career pathing data on the planet at LinkedIn. And we see that every 4 years, 40% of people change their jobs, their companies, their industries, their seniorities. There's a huge amount of churn. So to account for all this churn, you need to cast a pretty wide net. Not everyone. It's not like everyone goes and works in marketing, right? Neurosurgeons rarely become marketers, just as a random example. But you need to make choices, thoughtful choices about the types of people who could buy from you in the future. And you need to target those people too, not just the upper echelon that can buy from you today. The third assumption, I think John already covered pretty well, so I won't belabor the point, but buyers aren't the only audience that matters to a company. There is the media, there's potential hires, there's potential partners. When you actually expand your mind a little and you think about all the types of audiences that might help your business grow, you realize it's more than 5 accounts, right? It's probably 10,000 accounts, and it's probably a ton of other stakeholders out there in the business community that ultimately matter, and you need broad targeting to reach all of those people. The fourth assumption, there's only one left, so if you're getting bored of the legal argument, don't worry, it's wrapping up. Get into my closing remarks. I think the fourth assumption, maybe the most dangerous one, which is that our marketers are kind of grossly overconfident that they know exactly who's going to buy from them and that they just need to target those people. I think what you'll see in the data is that optimizations are generally a better strategy than trying to make predictions. So for instance, something I have learned in my 8 years here at LinkedIn is that often the best performing segment on LinkedIn is what we call run of professional, which means everyone on LinkedIn. Sometimes people get confused and think that means no targeting. It actually means all the targeting. It's all the targeting LinkedIn has in one segment. And when you target broadly like that, you see what's here on the screen here, which is that over time, the algorithms start to understand who's actually converting or who's signing up for a demo or who's watching the videos, and it starts to optimize delivery towards those audiences, and you get this kind of hockey stick performance. This is not just a LinkedIn thing, by the way. Any platform that has data and algorithms, you see the same type of thing, which is that you generally have to give the algorithm a broad audience to optimize, and that will generally outperform whatever spreadsheet data propensity model you've built of who you think is going to convert. Final thing I will just say, which is maybe like the simplest argument against hyper-targeting, is that the math often doesn't add up. I think many of us invest in hyper-targeting because we assume it's going to save us money because we're not going to reach the wrong people. The problem is that hyper-targeting usually increases your upfront costs, which then cancels out any of the downstream effects. You can do this math for yourself. This is actually dummy data, so you just need to kind of think about it and run the numbers for your own brand. But targeting everyone on the planet Earth, hugely inefficient for a B2B brand, almost certainly not going to pay off. But if you compare hyper-targeting versus a broad targeting segment, and you think about the lower upfront costs of the broad targeting segment, oftentimes the CPA and whatever the action is will ultimately be better on a broad targeting segment than on a narrow targeting segment. So what is the solution here? I'm going to say this again, since I often get in trouble for this. I am not saying target everyone. I'm saying target everyone who can buy from you now or in the future. Target the category. In B2C, that often does mean everyone. I used to have a client from Colgate-Palmolive who said to me, Peter, our target is anyone with teeth. If your target's anyone with teeth, you don't need ad targeting. You just need to reach basically everyone on the planet. If you're selling cloud computing or cybersecurity solutions or IT storage solutions, it is a narrow audience that can buy from you, but you need to reach all of those people. And the more people you reach, the more growth you'll get. That's a really important concept, maybe the most important and underrated concept in our industry, which is that reach is the biggest predictor of marketing effectiveness. Ultimately, you cannot influence a buyer if you never even reach the buyer in the first place. So, although many clients are very focused on trying to target the 5 people they think can buy from them, even if all those people convert, you'll only get 5 customers. So ultimately, you need to be reaching, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of buyers, not 5 buyers. To put this in more clinical or like academic terms, there's basically a chart here. This chart's been around for 40 years. And it talks about the difference between your share of voice and your share of market. So for me to tell you if your brand is going to grow and if finance has given you a sufficient budget, I basically just need to know 2 things. I need to know how much of the market do you own and how much of the market are you reaching. If you are reaching more customers than you currently have, you're probably going to grow. If you're reaching less customers than you have, you're probably going to shrink. The key metric here is ESOV, extra share of voice, most underrated marketing metric in the world. And it's just the difference between your share of voice and your share of market. You want extra share of voice above your market share. What our research at the B2B Institute has shown is that you can use ESOV to determine your marketing budget and ultimately to even predict growth. So different categories respond differently to different amounts of reach or spend, and you can see some of the differences here. What we see in B2B, based on our research with Binet and Field, is that basically for every 10 points of extra share of voice in B2B, you get about 0.7% market share per year. And again, the more reach you get, the more growth you get. Obviously, you don't have an infinite budget, so you need to work within your constraints, but you need to think very hard about how much market share you have, how many customers you actually work with, and you need to make sure you're reaching way more people than whatever that number is, to put it in very simple terms. So I think that's pretty much it. I will just recap, and then we'll turn it over for Q&A, which John and I are both looking forward to. John talked about the importance of brand building. If you want future growth, you need to invest in brand building. If you want really profitable, effective creative, then you need to make big bets on repeatable blockbuster franchises. And ultimately, if you want to be the category leader, you need to reach everyone in the category. You need category targeting. And I think that is pretty much the show. And now we will do some Q&A. John, would you like to come back? You have to turn your video on, John, and it's a very complicated technical maneuver you pulled it off. That's great, John.
Peter, you're still here?
Yeah,
what
I'm
have you
still
been
here.
doing this whole time?
I've actually been here this whole time. I'm not sure.
My gosh, I'm so surprised to see you.
So I guess let me get in the chat.
Yes.
See what kind of questions we got. Maybe we should stop sharing.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, sorry. Now I'm the one with
not as easy as people think.
Yeah, okay. Now I'm embarrassing myself because I said you had technical difficulties. And now, okay, great. John, I will ask the first question to you. Is there any useful resource from LinkedIn to enlighten certain industry use cases on brand versus activation? Example like SaaS might need both of them.
Yeah, there is. We've got a study that we referenced a bunch of times during this presentation. We did in partnership with Les Binet and Peter Field. And that talks a lot about how to break down, it's just called principles of growth. And it actually breaks down 5 principles of growth. One is how to balance brand and one is how to balance demand. But it talks about a whole bunch of other things. So I would say absolutely go read that report. You will learn quite a bit. We've also got some research which we can send through, which is just coming out on the laws of growth. And the laws of growth looks at, we talked about not the mental model being top of funnel, bottom of funnel, but in market, out market. We've got some great research on the 95-5 rule, which is essentially how we would actually think about the 60-40 rule. We'd actually say it's more like 90-10, although most people are not willing to be that aggressive, but the data does support being that aggressive. So I would say there's 2 things we've got. We've got the principles of growth. We've got also the laws of growth, a little bit similar. So actually, let's call it this. Principles of growth is one, and then how B2B brands grow is the other. You can go to B2B Institute LinkedIn. You can find our website, and then all the research is listed there.
Great. John, we've got a bunch of questions about like the difference between big brands and small brands and whether these principles apply equally to both. So why don't we start maybe talking about the idea of creative, like do our creative principles, are they equally applicable to big brands and small brands? What would you say, John? I'm curious to see.
Yeah, most small brands think, hey, the things that big brands do, like I don't compete with big brands, I can't do what they do, I don't have the budget. The reality is there's this idea called the law of duplicate purchase that is also on the B2B Institute website that shows, unfortunately, the biggest competitor, if you're a small brand you have, is actually the biggest brand in the category. So you do compete with the biggest brands in the category. It's an unfortunate reality. One of the things to understand, though, is most big brands do not actually follow most marketing science. They tend to operate more on opinion and less on, let's call it, evidence. So small brands generally can move a lot faster. And if you follow the evidence, you can outflank bigger competitors who tend to not follow the evidence. So I'd say small brands have a real advantage in the sense that they're faster, they can make the right decisions. But the reality of the situation is, you're trying to reach the same people in many cases big brands are trying to reach. If you're a small brand, that means you've got to do the things that work creatively and the things that work from a media perspective too. That would be my, I guess, snap response. What would you add, Peter?
I think it's great, John. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, at the Institute, we're interested in generalizable principles that hold true across lots of different brands in lots of categories and lots of markets and lots of sizes. I think everything we said to you today is equally applicable for a small brand and big brand. It's just going to look a little different in practice. And to be very honest, and this is sort of like unpopular thing people don't like to hear, but like marketing does generally favor big brands with huge amounts of money. If you were to stop someone in the street and be like, hey, people with huge amounts of money have big advantages in life, they'd be like, yes, thank you. We're very aware of that. For some reason, when you say that to marketers, they get pretty upset. But it's the reality of the situation. The more reach you get, the more growth you get. So obviously marketers with enormous media budgets have an advantage over people with smaller media budgets. But I think the key thing to remember in that share of voice, share of market chart is you just need to punch above your weight. So if you're a small brand and you only have 10 customers, then you don't need to reach 1 million customers to grow. You might only need to reach 1,000 customers. So these things can be right-sized depending on if you're big or small. When it comes to creative, I think John made a really important point, which is that I actually think small brands are at an advantage over big brands when it comes to following these creative principles. Marketing departments find it very hard to focus on one big blockbuster franchise every year because there's so many marketers in the marketing department. Everybody wants to do something different, have their own stamp. Nobody wants to do what last year's marketers do. Small brands, they have to be lean and concentrated by design because they don't have money to waste on creative they don't need. So on the creative front, I actually think small brands are an advantage over big brands, which is great news because our research, and we've done research on this, says creative's probably one of the biggest competitive differentiators you can find. The difference between good creative and bad creative, it's like a 10, 15x differential on sales. So I think that's probably us. That's it for us, John. What do we do now? Announce a raffle winner?
There was one more question.
Yeah.
On short-term versus long-term marketing. And then it talks a little bit about attention span. And so we could talk a little bit about what we know about attention, or even long or short, if there's anything you want to editorialize on there.
Attention's a hot topic. Yeah, maybe we could close with a little riff on attention. You want to talk about attention, John?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the key thing to understand is not all media is created equal. There is some media that is big and takes over the whole screen. And then there's some media that is tiny and in the corner and on, a page with 15 other ads. And you want to buy media that is big and takes over the entire screen and has no competition. That's going to be highly attentive. So people are going to see it and they're more likely to remember it. So you're going to get higher recognition, higher recall, and just better performance from an ad like that. Especially in desktop, a lot of ads are run through programmatic exchanges, and they stuff 10 different ads there, and your ad could be in the corner and nobody even sees it. So, we have to realize that in the old world, it was very easy. You were buying on radio, you were buying on TV, and you were buying in print, and all the formats essentially look the same. And so in some sense, all media was equal. Creative and media are not equal, and we need to treat them as such. So you do want high attention media. Obviously LinkedIn does have high attention media. That's part of the reason our ads do generally pretty well at reaching the right people and getting them to remember the brand. So that's what I would say on attention. There's a lot out there on attention. A friend of mine runs a company called Adelaide. If you want to go read more about attention, they've done a bunch of great stuff. A researcher we really like named Karen Nelson Field. She's a PhD from Ehrenberg Bass Institute. She's done incredible work, probably the best work on attention. If you're interested in that. There's a gentleman named Phil Barden who wrote a 3-piece series on attention and the value of attention and creativity. So a lot there to learn. I do think we should do the raffle winner because she doesn't want a raffle winner. It is Bianca Bertoa. Wow. So Bianca, congratulations. I don't know what you're getting, but I'd imagine it's probably.
I don't know what I'm sure it's extravagant and lovely. Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. One final plug. We'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. John and I post a steady stream of obnoxious contrarian opinions, so we look forward to meeting you there. And now I think we're going to go into a break, and then we're going to come back at 2:10 with Tiffany, and that's the plan. So thank you all very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you have a great day.
Hi there, I'm Tiffany Heinpel, AE Manager of the Canadian Marketing Solutions team. I'm thrilled to take you through the Age of Agility over the next 30 minutes. Welcome to Age of Agility. We're excited to share LinkedIn's latest B2B technology buying research with you today. 2020 was a turning point for today's evolving world of work. Many of us experienced significant change in both our personal and our professional lives. While work and personal blended into a state we had not yet seen before, businesses were forced to adapt in a way that we haven't seen. And it's often been called the Great Accelerator, a period that brought so much change and so much transformation. We are likely never to see a period like this again, perhaps only once in a lifetime. Personally, I've often heard it referred to as the Industrial Revolution 4.0. Welcome to the future, folks. From a LinkedIn standpoint, some of the changes we've made from a company perspective include moving our company bi-weekly meeting to a pre-recorded meeting so that people in various time zones dealing with various commitments can listen to it in their own accord. We've moved to a 50% remote work policy where you have an option to continue to work remotely. And we've moved to a more asynchronous communication style, whereby we're popping notes and chats into a team and expecting messages and responses throughout the day or over the next few hours. As you can see, evolving business models, emerging workplace trends, increased digital engagement. Some of you may have seen Satya Nadella's, who's Microsoft CEO's, moving piece from his annual letter to shareholders late last year. In the piece, he titled, "The Opportunity to Define the World We Want to Work In." Satya shared Microsoft's optimism for the future of what's possible through technology. He wrote that although this year has taught us that no business is 100% resilient, those fortified by digital technology are more resilient and more capable of transforming when faced with sweeping changes like those we are experiencing. The way people interact with business is fundamentally shifting, and there's no going back. This simple statement reinforced how crucial successful utilization of technology is for the world. It's a rally cry to those of us who are shaping the future of technology and companies. All of you in this virtual room have a hand in shaping the world we want to live and work in, and shaping the future of our organizations and teams along the way. So this brings us back to the age of agility. This is LinkedIn's data-driven perspective on B2B technology decision-making, which stems from our annual research designed to help technology marketers take action against the new trends in tech buying landscape and work smarter in the year and hopefully decade ahead. We are calling this the age of agility because in comparable Forrester research, they found that embracing and emphasizing the importance of agility in their organizations was the number one thing CMOs felt they were not discussing enough. So we wanted to make sure that we were bringing that to the forefront. Let's start with stating the obvious, shall we? You can see here, COVID-19 impacted global technology spending heading into 2021. That's obvious. Across every region, company size, and subcategory, close to half of buyers expressed that their budgets would be negatively impacted by the events of COVID. However, that trend is not as alarming as it seems. In fact, Forrester research shows that this technology cutting was only a priority for those businesses in disrupted or in survival mode. Some companies who navigated the unusual and maybe even improved scenarios from COVID have been actively exploring innovative ways to leverage technology and deliver value to employees and customers. Regardless, we do see a push and pull of spend. We believe that this is a direct reflection of three key macro themes. One, COVID personified the strengths and weaknesses of many business models. Things like digital adoption, changing buyer preferences, dependence on certain customers or segments of the economy became a reality. Some companies coped well, some did not. In fact, we put them into three categories. Business disrupted. Those were companies facing severe revenue and profit losses due to decreasing customer demand. Obviously, these businesses' technology budgets were likely to be cut to preserve cash flow. Business unusual. These were companies that worked and are working to develop creative solutions to overcome temporary revenue declines. And then there's business evolved. Those are companies that were really thriving in COVID. The reason I bring that up is I will refer to them throughout the presentation. Two, many companies were not using technology efficiently and perhaps were overspending leading up to 2020. So this led to massive amounts of technology bloat, whereby CTOs and CEOs sought to eliminate duplication as quickly as possible, again, to preserve cash flow. And finally, the pandemic brought the digital transformation back to the forefront. All this to say, there is a lot of discussion happening at the CIO, CMO, CEO level about what technology can do for employees and customers. This is contributing to why COVID has been called the great accelerator for business in both challenging and opportunistic scenarios. These discussions are happening more often and earlier than ever. So, knowing we have the foot on the gas of technology acceleration, I'm thrilled to walk you through these 5 technology trends. Are you seeing a theme here? Each trend exposes a different set of buyer dynamics taking place throughout the B2B technology buying journey. And hopefully, this provides you with a key takeaway to help your companies and brands navigate 2021 and the 2020s with success and agility. So on to our first trend. Empowering the next generation of IT guides. What does that mean? Well, it stems from the idea that the buying committee is diversified, but at the end of the day, IT still has to guide all the departments through their buying journey. IT is now responsible for linking all the needs together to find the best solution. For those who work with us regularly, you know we continue to reinforce the reality and importance of expanding the buying committee. In fact, you just heard that in John and Peter's presentation. This is because we continue to find that technology buyers are more than just IT decision makers. Think of yourself in whatever role you hold. Are you in marketing, planning, strategy, sales, operations? Have you not been privy to a survey or two about how you use technology, how you use the tools in your organization? I know we're constantly being consulted on how often, why, when, how we use certain tools. And this helps shape the input of what is purchased. And it's not just us. I mean, the data says that. An average B2B technology purchase has a lot of stakeholders who now play a role in identifying, researching, evaluating, purchasing, implementing, or renewing a business technology solution. This year, one of the most interesting things we saw was a concentration of revenue generating functions taking part in our survey. This means people in your org who are dealing with your customers. They're voicing the opinions of what tech stack they need. You can see here from the chart, finance, marketing, business development, all of these people who are interacting with those customers on the forefront are the people who are informing what tech stack they should have. They are driving that proliferation for technology, reinforcing that trend that John and Peter spoke to, which is that we need to stay wide when we're targeting. You can see here, I mean, from these numbers, the buying committee, it's widened not just a little, it's substantial. IT's input in technology decision-making has dropped 43% since we started running this survey in 2014. This also solidifies why we've chosen the word IT guide in this trend. IT must understand the technology, but they have to be able to guide the other sales functions or marketing or operations, the other seats at the table as to why this is helpful for their pain point. Here you see that IT's direct influence is far less than those of the other functions. 70% are actually weighted outside of IT. To bring this back to the macro trend, it's very clear that the future of organizational success and productivity will depend heavily on technology. So everyone is invested. Technology is a strategic priority for companies who are trying to become more future fit. What you see here on this chart is the dynamic of how that might happen from an audience perspective. Everyone has a say, but IT and the IT guide is the person who has to bring it all together for the employees and customers. So to conclude trend 1, the takeaway here is IT no longer makes the final decision. It's a cumulative group process, but they're required to tie it all together for customers and employees. Knowing that, the more familiar you can make this solution to all buying parties across all departments, the easier time your IT guide is going to have helping get it through. On to our next trend, aim for fame. So John and Peter also recently went through this. It highlights a key theme for those who are hoping to align and unify those various buying committee members. calls on the death of hyper-targeting, which you recently heard. And by that, I mean with so many individuals and complexities in this buying cycle and so much self-driven research taking place, marketers have to be continually investing in brand recall and favorability. Think about this. Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. This goes for a personal and a professional standpoint. Think about when you started to consider a major purchase, just personally. Where do you start? I would venture to guess you probably ask your friends and family what they use, what they think of it. It's the same thing in B2B. To stand out, you need to aim for fame. Fame being when everyone knows your name. And because so many people are involved in this buying decision, the early stages of research and evaluation carry a lot more weight than they did before. This means you need to invest in that upper funnel activity to carry that downstream conversation. Let's take a look. This won't come as a surprise to many of you, but the B2B technology journey is long, and the research confirmed this. In fact, nearly half of the purchasing journey extends beyond 1 year. And during the purchasing journey, we see buyers becoming more and more self-directed. Here we ask buyers reasons for initiating outreach with a new vendor. And the top 2 reasons were by far, not by a little bit, by far there, as you can see, following independent research and having determined relevance. This speaks to the changing world of B2B. This world is highly digitally enabled and less likely to result in a sale purely from lower funnel activity. In order to be successful, marketers must understand how to increase their likelihood of success from both a psychology and a probability standpoint. Our data showed that significant concentration of decision makers involved in upfront parts of the buying journey, as you can see there, 54, 53, 50. Also in the middle during implementation. This means those revenue generating functions are inputting who IT should even take a discovery call with. Early stage or make or break for most vendors. Yet too many marketers divert focus and efforts to lower funnel activity, allowing opportunities to slip away from you. This reinforces the importance of executing a full funnel approach and maximizing consideration and fame during the holistic buying process. For those familiar again with Peter and John's work, it has to do with things like mental availability and category entry points. Buyers, influencers, end users can only remember so much. So it's marketing's job to increase fame, which is awareness at scale, so that when they're at the table, your name comes up. The key takeaways here: aim for fame, awareness at scale. And remember that more and more companies are marketing in a digital-only environment. So now brand reach and presence are absolutely crucial. They can, in fact, make or break the long-term win rates. Trend 3, address the committee's paradox of needs. If the buying committee is now more diversified than ever, then we need to understand each function's need and address accordingly. So it's no secret that buyers from various departments face a paradox of needs. Think about it. The buyer in IT, the buyer in finance, the buyer in sales, the buyer in marketing, all have different objectives and needs. Sometimes they're competing motivations, interests, and priorities, and they can complicate that buying process. And this is where marketing can help. As the data indicates here, people are always open to learn, so long as the message is relevant. Personally, when I've struggled through internal paperwork process and a contract management software pops into my feed, I always check it out. Same thing when I'm dealing with an invoicing issue. If something comes up, I will check it out. We do this. We look for solutions. When we have a problem, we seek out solutions. On top of this, if you put thought leadership out there to augment those who are problem solving, you continue to position yourself as a leader. You're there when someone needs you. But don't take my word for it. Again, data reflects it. Here's a stack ranking of needs and important factors for the buying committee. No surprise, price is obviously a key factor, but please think about price in terms of value. Oftentimes, time to value is a key metric for software companies and their evaluation of a new technology purchase. But the ability to deliver value in various ways is nuanced. Now, think about some of the trends we just reviewed, like the expansion of the buying committee, the role IT plays throughout. Consider the long and weighted journey along the new technology purchase path. Here in this chart, you can see that the committee conversations come into play. This is because the buying committee are juggling many of the above priorities concurrently. Needs are frequently aligned to specific personas like end customers or implementers. What we need to help marketers and what you can help with is understanding how crucial strong messaging and positioning is. Our B2BI, again, John and Peter, talk about the misconception that you should advertise for solutions in the category. In fact, that's not the answer. Marketers need to advertise why and how they can uniquely deliver value against these paradox of needs. So how does this paradox of needs tie into challenger brands and or services? I know this was a question that I believe Sarah asked earlier. You can see here, 2 out of 3 buyers are hesitant to try a new brand. Most fall back on the existing and the familiar. There are a few that remain neutral, which is a better sign, but fewer than 1/3 of buyers want to embrace and follow through on awarding business to a new company. So what does that mean? How do you break through as a new brand? You must demonstrate relevance and value. For those businesses in improvement or growth mode, like we talked about earlier, increasing innovation is the #1 priority. This means that new brands need to showcase innovation through their marketing efforts, broadly and on LinkedIn, going back to aiming for fame, ensuring that branded messaging is out there and you're demonstrating how to provide solutions. So the takeaways here, you must address your committee's paradox of needs. Again, remember, the buying committee is wide and they are all coming at this from different angles. You must focus on value and reliability, and you must leverage your marketing strength to tell stories that help customers see the solutions. We're rounding the bend here, folks. We're on trend 4. Spark the virtual water cooler. This speaks for itself, but in this disconnected time, give people something to talk about. Leverage social proof to get people talking about your products and solutions. To grow awareness and trust in an increasingly competitive market, there is absolutely no substitute for happy customers and product advocates. People have always relied on social proof to make decisions. Think about it. When you made your last purchase, insurance, car, something larger, mortgage, banking, something along those lines, did you not go to your friends and family and ask who they use, why they use it, what they like? Of course you did. It's the same thing in B2B. Technology providers need to be innovative, affordable, reliable, all at the same time. This can help buyers justify technology spending within their earned budgets, but your advertising can't be the sole thing that drives this. You need to have happy customers. 1 out of 2 buyers, that's 50%, say that peer validation is a primary way to increase trust of a product. And awareness is generated from many different sources. So using a range of customer-friendly tools like case studies, podcasts, webinars, this will all help you build trust through social proof. How are brands innovating on this? Well, again, case studies don't need to be the only thing, and they don't need to be presented in a formal program. Instead, they can be presented as an insight into your customers and how satisfied they are with your brand. They can also be broken up into smaller testimonial type creative, and they can be jump-started through referrals. As B2B becomes more democratized, buyers will depend on social proof or peer validation for endorsements to guide your purchasing decisions. So finally, brand advocates are one of the most powerful tools technology companies have for increasing awareness and trust in their offering. Most brands already use traditional case studies in their marketing, but that's not enough. For your customers to become true advocates, you need to elevate their stories, make your customer their hero. The first step in fostering genuine social proof is connecting with customers to learn about their experiences in an emotive and human level. Use conversation to find out how your offering has helped them and widen the possibility for what that customer can do. Then bring these customer stories to life using a full range of tools at your disposal. Video, audio, podcasts. Ensure that you can engage the widest range of people in the most immersive storytelling experience possible. Finally, our 5th trend, seizing the post-sale frontier. With budgets under scrutiny, ensuring you provide the most value for your current customer is of utmost importance. We know from trend 3 that the buying committee is wider and more diverse than ever. 47% of buyers select a vendor based on knowledge and experience. What this also means, though, is a post-sale integration and setup is as important. You need to connect with all of the stakeholders who are making that decision to ensure their needs are being met. You can see here from this chart that the buying timelines for products at customer segments vary: SMB, mid-market, enterprise. Knowing that renewal, as you can see across all business segments, is your longest period, you as a marketer have time to provide post-sale value to your current customers. This can be in the format of how-to guides, best practices, one-on-one consulting, to get them to understand your products to the best of your ability. And then go back to trend 4, elevate their success stories where possible. So provide your customers with cross-selling exposure opportunities to other products in your organization to ensure they're getting the most from your product suite. The nice thing is, with all of this, time is on your side. Enterprise companies can take a year for this cycle of technology to be onboarded. As you can see here, the vast majority of people consider post-sale support a major factor when selecting a new vendor. I know personally, we entered an agreement with a vendor. The post-sale experience was less than ideal, and after a 12-month period, we canceled that service, which leads to the next data point, which is previous experience with a vendor is highly critical. It's crucial. These people who use your service, as you well know, can easily become a champion or a detractor at their next company, which could be your next client. The takeaways from Trend 5: set up your post-sale efforts early to ensure retention and happy customers. Not only can you target all current customers with ABM, but cross-selling and upselling will also make more of an impact for your current customers, and happy customers are brand ambassadors for you. To conclude this, technology adoption has accelerated due to COVID. We're all aware of that. We're not going back to the way things were, and the 5 trends we saw from our research, we can only anticipate continuing to grow. As a recap, the 5 trends are: empowering the next generation of IT guides. Help them help your customer. Your customer is wide and they are varied. They all have different needs, but IT is the person who has to link them all together. So help that person. Aim for fame in the customer journey. We only have so much brain and consideration space. You need to be in that consideration set amongst all departments. Address the committee's paradox of needs. They're all looking for something different. That person who is in sales versus IT versus finance versus marketing all have different problems, and they are looking for you to help solve those problems to streamline their customer journey and streamline the solutions they should be purchasing. Show them how you can help. Spark the virtual water cooler. Give people something to talk about. Elevate your customer success stories through creative storytelling, podcasts, creative, etc. You name it, just get that customer story out there. And seize the post-sale frontier. If you win an implementation, onboarding, and ramping while people are confirming their habits and behaviors with your product, you will win. And now we are going to announce our next raffle winner. Before we do, I want to thank you for attending this session on the Age of Agility. Our next raffle winner is Amber Cochran. The winner will receive a digital gift card, and we will reach out post-event. Thank you so much, Amber. Congratulations. I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic gift card. And now I'm going to pass this on to Liz Demers, Senior Partner Manager for our Fireside ABM chat.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Oh my gosh, this has been such a great session so far. Thank you again, all of you, for joining us. There have been so many great insights, or trends, I should probably say, trend overload, but I particularly loved that ESOV that Peter and John were talking about, that extra share of voice, which I think John could have used when he was on mute. And then the idea of giving people something to talk about. Definitely something that we're going to try and do with this session. So thank you for joining us. Like Tiffany said, my name is Liz Demers. I'm a Senior Partner Manager here at LinkedIn. And the team I work on works with technology platforms that integrate with LinkedIn Marketing Solutions to make it easier for you to achieve your goals on LinkedIn. And over the last 4 years, I have focused on building and supporting LinkedIn's community of ABM-focused partners. LinkedIn has a number of native features and solutions that enable ABM strategies, matched audiences, company engagement report, campaign manager, sales navigator. The marketing partners that I work with in particular bring many of these pieces together, allowing you to more easily and effectively plan, execute, and measure your ABM programs. So I've had a front row seat to the acceleration of account-based strategies on and off LinkedIn over the last few years. And one thing I've noticed is that whether you are just starting your ABM journey, like some of you might be, or some of you who might be ABM wizards, it can be really daunting to weed through the jargon, the flipped funnels, the data, the measurement, the technology to make your programs as impactful as possible. That's why we're here. I brought together two inspiring perspectives today, the academic and the practical, to discuss some principles around account-based marketing, account selection, data measurement that can be used on and off LinkedIn. So I would like to welcome to the virtual stage Anton Kim, a senior marketing manager at TELUS, and Kyle Jepson, a senior inbound sales professor at HubSpot. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
To get things started, I'm going to have each of you introduce yourselves and give me kind of the cliff notes on your history with ABM. Anton, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My experience with ABM is, I would say, has been fleeting, though it seems like a lot has happened. And what I've learned over my time with ABM is that a lot does happen in a short period of time. The level of learning, the level of experimentation, and the amount of data that I've been able to handle and manage has just been an absolute tremendous experience. And I'm really thrilled to be on this journey.
Thank you for joining us. All right, Kyle, to you.
Yeah, I create courses for HubSpot Academy. They're all free online courses. My main discipline is sales, but a couple of years ago now, HubSpot launched a suite of ABM tools, and we found that a lot of our customers had very different ideas about what ABM was, didn't fully understand how to execute it, even with the tools in hand, didn't understand the basics of the strategy. And so I was tasked with researching, what does a good ABM strategy look like? What is ABM? Can we get some consensus on this? And so I've been researching and talking about ABM ever since.
Love it. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what we're hoping to answer today. So I think we have the right brains here today. Now, like I said, I brought you both here to talk about ABM, account-based marketing. But before we go too much further, I want to do a little bit of an icebreaker. I know folks who have been at this Tech Inspire event, we are on the tail end. So I want to do something a little bit different and test your knowledge on the other ABM. That is ABM Industries, the global facilities management provider. You may have seen them in your buildings around the globe. You go to abm.com, that is their website. So you are experts in ABM, emerging experts in ABM. I have 4 questions. They are multiple choice. You'll each get 2 of them. Don't worry, there are no points, no winners, no losers. Let's get started. So ABM Industries, the company was founded in over 100 years ago in 1909. What did the founder, Morris Rosenberg, do? Anton, this question is going to be for you. A, chimney sweep. B, window washer. C, coachman. D, marketer for Macy's.
Wow, good luck, Anton.
I'm going to go with B.
I'm convinced you can see my screen. That is the correct answer. He was a window washer.
Yes.
All right. Kyle, the next one's for you. It's pretty easy.
Great.
What does ABM stand for? A, all about mopping. B, American Bureau of Management. C, American Building Maintenance Company. Or D, the meaning of the acronym was lost to history?
How about C?
Correct.
Whew.
Wow, okay, you guys have
Right.
clearly done your research. They did not know that I was going to do this icebreaker, by the way. So this is all their just incredible knowledge from the internet. Anton, during World War II, ABM helped the war effort by doing what? A, cleaning Navy ships. B, building airplanes. C, packaging food for soldiers. Or D, starting a newspaper to distribute at the buildings they cleaned.
I'm going to go with C.
You know, that is not right.
Oh.
You've done so well so far, 50%. You get an F. It is A. They cleaned Navy ships. All right, final question. Kyle, this is to you. What mascot represented the company ABM in the 1950s and 60s at industry trade shows? A, Bucky the Bucket. B, Mr. Mop. C, an actual giant dressed as a janitor. Or D, someone in a Canadian mounted police officer outfit.
How about A?
A was Bucky the Bucket. I knew I would trick you with this one. It was actually C. There was an actual very, very tall person who was dressed as a janitor who would walk around at the industry trade shows. So again, you get an F, 50%. These are actual grades. But luckily, we're not here to actually talk about that ABM. So let's go into the actual discussion about account-based marketing. Now, I do want to remind everyone who is watching, I'll be impressed if any of you knew the answers to those questions, but please ask your own questions in the chat throughout. We will have time at the end to get to them, but let's dive into the discussion. I've split today into kind of 4 sections, and we'll be fluid with this. But the first one, I want to kind of dive into the opportunity of ABM. We all know it's really important. So Kyle, let's start with you. ABM is important. Like, that's why we're here. It's the hottest trend. I feel like every year I'm hearing like more and more ABM, more thought leaders, more companies out there, more industry events talking about the strategy. But what would you say the opportunities are that ABM presents, or the challenges that ABM solves? How has that evolved over time, and why is the strategy particularly hot right now?
Yeah, so I feel like actually Tiffany hit on this pretty well. And it's not, I mean, she was talking a lot about IT and tech, but in all industries, we're seeing just a huge expansion of buying committees, right? You no longer sell to just one decision maker ever. If you're in B2B, you're seeing buying committees springing up where they weren't before. You're seeing them grow larger where they used to be fairly small. And ABM is a really great strategy for managing and connecting with those committees, right? You can identify who the members of that committee should be. You can build relationships with them. So once they assemble themselves to make a purchase decision, hopefully they are already, at least most of them, on your side and predisposed to buy from you. And so I think that is really a lot of what I'm seeing more recently, especially in the last year or so, is that's the framing. Hey, are you struggling to get that buyer committee working and communicating and buying and making a decision and not just stalling? ABM can help with that. I feel like that's more and more what I'm hearing, and it makes sense because, as Tiffany said, this trend is definitely on the rise. But I think ABM's been around for a while. It's not a new thing, depending on who you ask and how you define it. It's been around for a decade or two, you know? And I think there's always been a need in a B2B setting, especially if your product is fairly expensive, meaning someone's not just going to whip out the company credit card and buy it. It's a deliberative decision. ABM is a really great way to infuse that complex sales process with enough personalization and helping and focus to be able to keep the sale moving forward. And so I think that has always broadly been the appeal and why it's applicable to most B2B companies. But then especially as we see the growth of buying committees, I think it'll become more and more crucial to get really good at it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love the idea of breaking down kind of a complex buying process with that personalization and helping people. It's really very customer centric, which is great, and what customers are expecting more and more. Now, Anton, in your experience, I know when we chatted kind of in our prep for this, you said you were involved both at your previous company in kind of the research phase. You were planning to start an ABM program. And so you did all that research, and now you're in kind of an early and growing ABM practice at TELUS. Can you speak to some of the challenges that you were trying to solve with enabling an ABM strategy, either at your previous company or now, and perhaps how ABM is starting to drive some value for you currently?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. At my previous place, because we were in the exploratory phase, ABM was a nebulous concept, not only to the marketing team, but to the organization at large. And as you really need to have alignment between sales and marketing, getting sales to understand this was a really big step. And over time, we'd already built trust with them in what we do. But to take that step further and say, hey, we're going to take your portfolio and use that as our audience, was a really interesting step in educating them and also getting them aligned. My takeaway from that whole experience there, not only from the sales side, but also in understanding the MarTech side of things, is just, it's key to have good foundations. But with ABM, you can start small. You don't have to, build the skyscraper in your first attempt. So my key takeaways were build trust with sales and continue to have that trust with them so that you can have these conversations and that they be open. And where I am now, basically at TELUS, the work we're doing is, compared to my last place, light years ahead of, well, obviously the research. So it's, the amount of data that I get to interact with that I touched on earlier, as well as, the challenges that are put in front of us, are really are really pretty exciting. But they also remind me again of the key learning from the previous place, which is iterate. It's okay to test and learn. It's okay to pilot something and it not work. Just take the learnings from it, apply it to the next, and just keep going.
Yeah, I think that's such an important takeaway. I think, as I teased up at the top, ABM can be really daunting with so much happening. So I think the fact that you have kind of this experience now at two companies, understanding that this relationship with sales is so foundational, and starting small there, saying we're going to use your portfolio as our target list. Look how we can help you building that trust. And then even moving into the active practice now at TELUS, this incremental learn and iterate, I think is fantastic. And you mentioned all the data that you have at your fingertips. I think we'll pop into our next section where we chat a little bit more about data. Now, everyone who's here, this is our rapid fire section. It's very brief, it's very rapid. But I've asked Anton and Kyle, they had the option to either bring their thumbs for a thumbs up, thumbs down, or sign, because for each word that I say or each phrase, I'm going to have them say yes, this is really good for ABM, or not so much. And I would like to say that these are personal opinions. Please do not kind of go to their companies and say that kind of, oh gosh, Kyle said that he really didn't like X. So we're going to do this, but I want to make sure everyone knows what they're seeing. So Anton and Kyle, can you please show me what your thumbs up looks like for yes?
I will supplement mine with a. I have a 5-year-old daughter named Nora, and she drew me a smiley face thumbs up and a frowny face thumbs down.
Love it.
So I'm noticing you can sort of see through. We're getting a little bleed from the lights in the background, but I will make it as clear as possible.
Perfect. So we have thumbs, we have drawings from children. This is fantastic. Let's get this going. So look for the thumbs up, thumbs down from Anton and Kyle. All right. Intent data. Key to ABM. Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, we have an up and a medium up. First party data. All right, both thumbs up. Personalization. Thumbs up. Firmographic data. Up and a little shrug, thumbs up. Predictive data. Oh, we got some iffies here, some sideways thumbs. We didn't prep the sideways thumbs. Big technology stacks. We have a thumbs down and kind of a sideways thumbs down. Micro targeting. Peter and John are yelling that thumbs should be going down, but micro targeting. Okay, good, kind of middle. I think we'll be able to touch on this a little bit. Engagement data. Thumbs up. Multi-channel for ABM. Up. Stale old data. Down. And finally, real trick one here, LinkedIn data. Thumbs up. Perfect. So, I mean, a lot of thumbs up, a lot of mediums, a lot of down. I think the takeaway here is there's a lot of data out there and it can be totally overwhelming. Now, data, Anton, you mentioned it's really exciting, the data that you have at your fingertips. It can be amazingly valuable when you apply it in the right way. But that can be hard, particularly with all the options and with the changes that are happening in the space. So, Anton, I'm going to come to you first here. How do you think about data in your programs, and how do you think about applying data through the life cycle of an ABM campaign?
Data provides the actionable insight that we can actually build our hypotheses and our campaigns and our results on. So they're really foundational to the work that we do. We use the most relevant data that we have, which is obviously our customer data first, because our customers are at the heart of everything we do. So with that in mind, when we build our campaigns, we look at that data set, and then we look at how we can enrich that data set with other third-party data as well.
So first party data, I mean, you both gave big thumbs up to that first party data. So first party data is key, and then you're looking to enhance all the way through. Now, like when you look at third party data, are you looking across kind of intent, firmographic, predictive? Do you have any kind of fan favorite data sources, or is it something that you're also learning and iterating with, Anton, since it is still relatively early in the life of your program?
Yeah, we're, and I speak for myself on this. I'm learning and iterating. I think that there's so many different data sets out there, but what I think is really important about the data that we use is, does it give us a better view of what the customer does, or who they are, or where they are in their, in their business transformation journey or whatnot. So really, I'm open to exploring different possibilities as long as the data set provides those key answers.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I know and talking to some other marketers, folks out in the ecosystem, just gaining that single source of truth on who the customer is, what their challenges are, what they're trying to accomplish. And then to your point earlier, Anton, having that alignment with sales so that you can share that and you're having these cohesive touch points, not only from marketing, but through to your sales teams, just builds that trust with the customer. And you don't want to be kind of assaulting them, surprising them, and meeting them where kind of with lower funnel stuff when they're upper funnel. So all of this data, I think that's a great point, figuring out kind of what your end goal of understanding the customer is and finding the data that supports that. And it can be any number of data sources.
Yeah, and I'll also add that it's also about, I mean, we also add our relationship with sales is a two-way street. So they add a lot of insight to, you know, to our process as well. So it's being able to add value to the work that they do as well, so that we can, you know, so that we're not undermining the relationship and the trust that we have with them.
That's a really great point, and sharing that data back and forth with them. Keeping that trust as the program grows.
Yes.
So, Kyle, the whole world of data, like, what do you see as a missed opportunity for account-based marketers? What are ABM kind of practitioners, people who are maybe going to start a program, what might they undervalue or misuse or overuse? Kind of what are you seeing out there in the world of data?
Yeah, but you'll notice I gave I should have had my daughter draw a third time because I'm very wishy-washy. Because all of these, well, not all of them, some were clearly stale data, always bad, right? But like in general, there is a wealth of data really any modern business is going to be collecting and generating. And my worry about giving a steadfast thumbs up to every one of them is that people will think, oh, I have to have every single one of these. And the reality is, no, start where you are. I love Anton's tone. And this is something we'll probably both come back to a lot. Like his analogy, you don't have to build the skyscraper from the beginning, right? Like you just got to start by starting. And I know when I talk to a lot of companies or individuals who are thinking about ABM or sold on ABM and trying to get started with it, so often, I mean, I will never say anything bad about the idea of an ideal customer profile, right? You need that. You have to define that. But I think so many people get caught up in having a perfect one, that they're always a month away from launching their first campaign, right? Like, oh, next month is the month we are launching this thing. Like, oh, we just discovered this other data source. Let's analyze it, right? And like, no, Anton has been talking about you have to iterate, and that's the only way to learn how to do this, right? You gotta start, and you gotta see how it goes, and you gotta regroup and iterate and improve, right? And if this particular channel didn't work, either change how you're using it or stop using it and focus on a different one, right? And it'll take a few tries to get something that works, and then it'll take more tries to make that work better, and you will probably never stop iterating on your ABM strategy, right? And so I think the data is vital, is crucial. I mean, you said, Liz, we don't want to be hitting people with stuff that's irrelevant, and absolutely we don't. But we've got to, just start with what we have and try a thing and get the results, and then learn and improve, and that's how we're going to get better over time. It's I think too much pressure on ourselves and on our company to expect that we can look at that. If we stare at the data long enough, we will have the infallible ABM strategy that will work 100% of the time, forever, right? Like that's just not the nature of marketing or sales or business in general, right? So I think this data is vital. Absolutely use it. But understand that you only get good at something by being bad at it first.
That is a very good point. I've been terrible at a great many things. But no, I actually, what you were saying, Kyle, about kind of the ideal customer profile, the ICP, it takes you back to what John and Peter were talking about in that thought experiment, where if you have, I don't remember what it was, 30 assumptions or 100 assumptions for each additional assumption you make about whatever it is, the odds of it being wrong increase. So if you kind of use all of this data and you're absolutely sure you know that your ideal customer profile definitely wants to buy from you, like maybe not. So the idea of starting small, or perhaps starting with 1 or 2 data sources, your first party data, and maybe you want to try intent, maybe you want to just do firmographic is the way to start, and then you learn and iterate.
Yeah, absolutely. And just my personal opinion, not on ABM, but on anything, is that the longer you spend planning and prepping, the higher the stakes are, right? If it's like, here's our first ABM campaign, we worked on it for 3 weeks, let's see what happens. If it doesn't work, people will be like, well, maybe we should have planned more, right? But if it's like, here's our first ABM strategy, we've been working on it for 6.5 years, like, okay, it better bring some results, right? Like to just break even at this point is going to be very difficult. And so I'm all for just jumping in and giving it a go.
All right, we're going to move on to what I'm calling the debate that never was. So a little peek behind the curtain, Anton and I were chatting, and Anton and I knew each other a little bit. Anton used to be a LinkedIner back in the day. So we were chatting when we were prepping for this fireside chat for you all. And I had hoped to set up this kind of head-to-head debate between Anton and Kyle, like a real heavy hitters situation. It was going to be on pay-per-view. It was going to be really exciting. And the debate was going to be leads versus engagement, right? Because historically in ABM, or at least what I have heard, is that ABM is about engagement. It's around kind of these subtle signals. How are you reaching? Who's coming to the website? What are they reading? And using that to inform how you nurture these accounts through the funnel. And the lead was dead. There, I think a company went out with a marketing campaign. The lead is dead. But now kind of leads are coming back in, and folks are thinking maybe the lead is not dead. ABM does often sit within a demand gen organization within a company. So I was saying, let's do lead versus engagement. And Anton, basically, could you tell everyone what you told me? What do you think, lead versus engagement?
Well, yeah, I didn't view it as such an adversarial relationship. In fact, I viewed it more as a symbiotic relationship to a degree. If you think about the buyer's journey, I mean, everyone's out there trying to get the buyer's attention. That's in the form of adding value to their journey by giving them content that, you know, with which they can self-educate, and more content with which they can nurture. And that's great. ABM is also about sales, and engagement is not a metric ultimately that will that will actually bring in the sale. Engagement is a metric that informs the lead to help inform the salesperson once the lead is handed off as to what, you know, what conversations they should have. And also, what level of understanding does this lead or does this customer have about, you know, said product and so forth. So there are other elements that, in my opinion, that do go into what makes a really strong lead. I believe that engagement is a really important piece, because you can engage and engage and engage, and it could lead nowhere. Or you could have a million leads that are, many of which are unqualified. So it's the fine balance between the two, and it's how the two operate, again, symbiotically, that I think is really important to flag here.
Yeah. So as you all can tell, like, I was completely deflated. Anton is right. Wonderful symbiotic relationship. And I loved the pun you kind of had there, Anton. All this engagement leads to, I thought that was great. I'm not sure if you planned it, but I thought it was a really good point. Like, there are these, and Kyle, this was your term, these false dichotomies out there. it's one or the other. It's probably in data too. I have to use this, not that. One is better, one is worse. So like Anton, I'm going to stay with you for a moment. So you use engagement, you use leads. So how and when through the funnel or through an ABM campaign are you using these metrics to measure success? Or I'll kind of pivot the question a bit. How do you measure success, like through an ABM program? Are these the metrics that you're looking at most, or is there something else that you think about when you're evaluating, when you go to optimize and make these incremental changes?
Well, that's a great question. Engagement really helps inform an aspect of the quality of the lead. I mean, if someone just filled out a form on the first go with little to no engagement, it's either they're that dream customer that every sales rep has dreamed about who's going to make that purchase, or it's just a huge waste of time. And 90, I'm not going to say 100, but just under 100% of the time, it's a huge waste of time. I think where we also look at engagement is also just is our content resonating, right? Are we talking to the right people and saying the right things? You know, not so much, sorry, not the right things, but are we reaching them and really, again, resonating with them? Because again, that buyer's journey being so long, or in some cases, however long it may be, we have to add value to that journey by providing the right content, by providing the right pieces of content at the right time. And that's measured basically by engagement. And ultimately, it's those inputs that help us pre-qualify the leads that we then pass on.
I love that idea of using one metric to qualify the other metric. A lead is great, but a lead without engagement is almost 100% a waste of time a lot of the time. So I think that's a really good tip, is layering these metrics. Again, it's not one versus the other. It's how do you layer them, and how do you contextualize the metrics with each other? Mm-hmm. Kyle, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that if you want, but I know you and I also we started talking about these false dichotomies in ABM, in B2B marketing, and wondering kind of what else you see out there, these binaries or false dichotomies that aren't really there at all.
Yeah, I mean, the false dichotomies are everywhere, right? In life and in business. And I think some of it is just, we are in so much of a hurry and we're under so many pressure. We don't pause for a minute to ask, like, is this binary actually binary? Because almost never is it actually binary, right? There's almost always some hybrid option or some third option, right? That we're just failing to notice. But then also just, I think you mentioned the lead is dead, right? And I mean, HubSpot has been, we are all in on inbound, right? And we have at various times tried things like cold calling is dead, right? And like, if you want to make a splash, you want to be a little controversial, you want to start a conversation, that's a great way to do it, right? But then at the end of the day, when you actually have to run your business, it turns out like usually the happy medium hybrid option is the best. And I know for a long time, people viewed inbound and ABM as you could do one or the other, right? But they were somehow incompatible and mutually exclusive. And like, no, actually, you know, if you look at what inbound entails with investing in SEO and a content strategy and events like this, right? Absolutely, regardless of whether you're using ABM or not, regardless of whether you're B2B or B2C, you should be doing something like that, right? You have to have an online presence if you're going to do business in the 21st century. But then if you are a good fit for ABM, right? If you're in a really specific vertical, or if you know, you have really large buying committees or whatever it is that qualifies you to be good at ABM, there are a few things there. You can build that on top, right? Like keep investing in SEO, keep your content strategy, keep running events, but then get a little targeted, reach out to individuals that you really believe you can help and say, hey, I'm trying to help you. Like Anton mentioned, adding value throughout the buyer's journey, right? If you were doing that, great, right? Like, let's not worry about, is this inbound? Is this ABM? Is this outbound? Is this something else? Like, who cares what it's called, right? If it works and if it makes happy customers, which was another thing that was talked about in an earlier session, then great. You are doing business the 21st century way, you're going to be successful. But anytime someone paints things in black and white and says, pick one, you can't have both, I would recommend taking a breath and pushing back on that and asking it if there is a hybrid or a third option, or something, because it's nothing in the modern world is really that clear cut, I don't think.
So these are not only lessons for ABM, but lessons for life, everyone. I think that we live in the gray area. There's room for all things, everyone. But I think that's a really good point. And there's no need to kind of push inbound out of the way, or push kind of a real demand gen program out of the way, or get rid of branding. Like, brand is so key, and you can do brand with ABM, but all of these things work within kind of a larger marketing mix. And if we had kind of a longer time, Anton, I would ask you about that, but I know we want to keep some time for questions. Some questions have been rolling in, still have time to add them, everyone, so please do. But I'm going to kind of close with some ABM lessons learned. So Anton, now that you've had this experience with account-based marketing, building these programs, planning for these programs, what's something you wish you knew when starting your ABM journey? What can you share with the group here that if someone was in your position a couple of years ago, you wish you had known?
I think I touched on it earlier. Start small. Don't think of the grand enterprise grade, ABM campaign where you're targeting, where you're marketing on a one-to-one basis. Start small and start broad, and then really start to cast in your nets. And don't be, don't look for that single silver bullet. A lot of people are out there saying, oh, this is the answer to ABM. ABM is what you want it to be. I mean, everyone has their own recipe, on how to make brownies, for instance, right? There's no one recipe. So if you think about it, you can make it as big as you want. You can make it as small as you want. The only thing that's limiting you from bringing it to life is how big you want to start. So don't be afraid to start small. And don't be afraid to fail.
It's a really good point. Also, recipes that create fudgy brownies are the best, just to level set. Now, Kyle, so what's one thing you wish all the ABM marketers here would try in their programs? Like, what's something you wish that ABM marketers would do?
Yeah, I've deciding here at the end of this session that Anton and I are basically the same person. I want to echo and reiterate everything he just said. And it's all about just starting and learning, and not thinking of this like, okay, July is coming, we'll run our ABM strategy. If it works, we'll do ABM for the rest of forever. And if it doesn't work, we're going to abandon it and try whatever buzzword comes up in August, right? Like, I think just starting small and starting simple is the best way to go. We have a case study at HubSpot, a company called Ask Cody, which is, remember the days when we worked in offices and like there were, if you went to a conference room, there might be like an iPad and you could book the room or see what the schedule was. Ask Cody does that specifically for large law firms in the United States. That's a very specific audience, right? There are only a few hundred, a few thousand of those. And they are just all in on making meetings awesome for large law firms. And so ABM makes a ton of sense because like you got to go out and find those companies, right? And their tool stack, one of the things, Liz, you had a thumb up, thumb down, but one of the things I committed to thumbs down was a big, expensive, complicated tech stack, right? HubSpot was their CRM and sales outreach tool, and then they had LinkedIn, right? And kind of their whole strategy was we're going to have some optimized ads. We're going to have automated email and like LinkedIn Connect request sequences. which you can build it with a HubSpot LinkedIn integration. And we're going to have industry-specific landing pages, just hyper specialized. We understand you, big law firm. Here is how we're going to help. That was it. Those 3 pieces. And they ran with that. And within 2 months, that one campaign was responsible for 12% of the entire revenue of the company, right? And that's a fantastic result, right? We keep saying, like, don't feel bad if you fail. Like, you may not fail, right? Like, you may do something really great. But that's just HubSpot and LinkedIn, right? Like, there are a ton of other tools out there that I don't mean to disparage them at all. They provide value, and depending on what you're trying to do, you may need them. You should pull them in and integrate them if they will actually provide value to the customers you're trying to reach. But just think of the simplest form of your ABM strategy, right? Forget for a minute all the tools you could be using. Just look at what you have, look at who you're trying to reach, and figure out how you bring those 2 things together, right? And then try it. I think that is just my general advice here. Is don't overthink it. Like, there are a lot of things you could try, and if you're just getting started with ABM, a year from now, think about adding some of those things, right? Or if you've been at ABM for a while, maybe like evaluate, where are we losing people, right? And maybe it is a tool that you could slot in there that would help, or maybe it's a tweak to your strategy, or maybe it's a rethinking of responsibilities in your team, or whatever. But just get it going and then make incremental changes, little shifts. Look at this conversion rate. That could be better. How can we improve it, right? And then the downstream effects of that are awesome. And then great. Now we'll fix this other thing, and just a little at a time, you'll get there.
Yeah. I think that is like the main takeaway here today. And it's come through, I think, in every section. It's start small. This is not as daunting as it seems to be in many cases. And also I feel like there is a lot of FOMO out there when people are talking about, look at this kind of technology, look at this data source, look at all these integrations that can happen. And I have to tell you, I'm partial to integrations. I work with a lot of our LinkedIn's technology partners. And I've met some customers that they don't have tech stacks, they have tech mountains. But even they will say it has taken them a long time to get there. They don't just jump all in. They don't kind of marry the first tech platform they meet. It is slow, incremental additions and change. And I think that's valid across the board. Now, time is going fast. We have time for just a couple of questions. The first one, Anton, I'm going to pose to you, and let me pull it up here. So how you talked a little bit about this, kind of building the trust with sales. So how did you start? Like, what were your first steps? Either at your previous company or currently at TELUS, for how you started to gain alignment internally to invest in ABM as a marketing approach and kind of get sales on board?
As a former LinkedIner, my background actually is sales. So I've always approached the work that I do in marketing with a view to sales. But I think the questions that I always ask when I would sit down and talk to my sales counterparts are, what are your challenges and what's stopping you from achieving them? And what, if everything were working properly for you, or, if you could have your way, what would you prioritize? And those were the questions that I always started with. Because basically, I mean, given how open-ended they are, they always resulted in slightly different answers depending on who I spoke with. But as I spoke to more and more people, the themes, there were common themes that were always the same. This corridor is a priority for us, or this, selling this, getting more wallet share, with this product is really important to us. Okay. And then as part of that organic conversation, I would put myself in the customer's role and ask them, okay, so why is this important? Why do I need this as a customer? And with those inputs, then I would be able to go back and say, okay, Now, if we were to put aside everything we just said, what, how can we work together then to address those key concerns based on these two priorities? And it was through those conversations that I was able to start to build the trust. And then by showing them explaining to them how ABM works, they were more open to it because I had a fundamental understanding of, well, what their pain points are and what their goals are, rather than coming in with, this will answer all of your questions. This will increase sales. Because as I've said before, there is no silver bullet that will address everything. And also in having those conversations, I was able to, again, frame things in, let's start with something small. Can we address this? And then start to build up and build their trust with each continuous success or learning that we're able to implement.
Now I'm going to do a quick follow-up question. So when there were successes, did you take that and share that around internally with kind of leadership at TELUS, sales leadership, et cetera, to try and build that ABM budget as well? Is this something that you would kind of really report up when you were starting small to get the buy-in and build the program?
Our team is very enthusiastic about the work that we do. And we've got a really passionate leader who really believes in ABM and is not only an inspiration to us all, but also a real a voice within the organization. And I would say that without such an impassioned leader, this would be a very different experience. It really would. And so to answer your question, we do socialize, and share, not so much. We don't say, oh, we've succeeded here, but it's just like, to our counterparts, this is how we're going to enrich your experience. This is what we've gotten from the previous campaign. Let's see how this helps enrich your experience with your customers.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And having a champion for the program that has a real seat at the table and creating that place for talking about ABM is enriching, not just getting customers, but enriching the experience of the sales teams of various cross-functional teams and helping them do their jobs. I think that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just say, I'd say, it's about, again, and I've used the term adding value, but I'm a firm believer in adding value, like not only to the customers, but to our stakeholders as well. And it's our results that I believe help add value to those relationships.
Yeah. Now, Kyle, we only have time for one more question. So Kyle, I'm going to go to you because I feel like this is for you. Anton works at TELUS. It's a big company. They have a lot of resources and everyone's working in scarcity. It can be difficult. But Kyle, can ABM work for startups? Like, what does that look like? How is that possible? Like, we don't have all these teams. Everyone's wearing 100 hats. How does that work?
I think, it'll vary a little product to product, depends on what your company's selling. But if you're a B2B startup, I would say there's definitely space for ABM. And in fact, if I imagine a startup for a minute and you're trying to get those first few customers, some sort of ABM strategy is probably going to be just kind of the intuitive default you do, right? Because you don't yet have the advantage of having built a big content marketing machine and like having a social media, like nobody's heard of you, right? Because yesterday you didn't exist. And so I think an ABM strategy where it's just like, okay, we built this product to solve this problem for this kind of person, right? Where do we find that person? Where do they work? And let's just say, hey, we try this out, right? And it's interesting. I mean, if you're very, very, very early stages, right? If you're trying to get those first 10 customers, going back to this idea of how important it is to have advocates, when you're getting your first 10 customers, you don't have any advocates, right? But maybe those first 10 customers is like, look, we built this thing and we really want you to try it for the low price of just leaving us a review online, right? 10 customers, let us know. And then you start to build that, right? And as you work with those first few customers, make sure you're capturing your learnings. Okay, wait, hold on. Turns out this industry here has these regulatory issues that makes it so they can't actually use our product, and we don't have the legal staff to navigate. We're not going to deal with that industry anymore. Let's look at this industry over here, right? And you'll sort of discover your ICP as you go, and all of that's all account-based marketing, right? Like, and at the same time, you should absolutely be investing in, building your website and getting that SEO presence, maybe having a blog, maybe making educational content, whatever it is you need to do in your industry. But that will take time to build. And when you're getting started, you need those customers. You need them coming in, right? And so you're going to go out and look for the customers that you think will fit. And in the early stages, your founder or founders' intuitions about who we built this product for, that's your ICP at that point, right? And so you are doing ABM. And so I think, yes, absolutely. Not only is ABM a great way for B2B startups to get started, it's kind of maybe the only way.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think kind of the through line here, start small, incremental change. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at time here. The time has flown really quickly. So not only are we finished with our fireside chat, but we are in the final minutes of this Tech Inspire event. I hope everyone has had a wonderful time. I want to thank Kyle and Anton so much for lending their expertise on account-based marketing, and that other ABM did better than I thought, actually. We do have raffle winners like the other sessions, but this time we have two. So congratulations to Ryan Stark and Nadia Kim. Super excited for you. That's great. And to close things out, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Michael Megori.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz, Kyle, and Anton. Really enjoyed that chat. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Megori, Manager, Client Solutions for our LinkedIn Toronto team. We hope you had a great afternoon of listening and learning from all of our speakers and panelists. We started the day hearing from Peter and John talk about the big B2B trends that will play out over the next 10 years. Great news for all of us. The future of marketing is bright, and the future of marketing definitely is brand. Remember, if you want future growth, invest in brand building. If you want profitable creative, invest in blockbuster franchises. If you want category leadership, invest in category targeting. In our Age of Agility session that Tiff led, we spoke about how we can empower the next generation of IT guides, how we can aim for fame in the customer journey, addressing the committee's paradox of needs and the needs for marketers to elevate the use of case studies and social proof to inspire existing customers to advocate for the brand. We talked about sparking the virtual water cooler and give people something really exciting to talk about, as well as seizing the post-sale frontier. Marketers need to seize the opportunity to help inform, drive, and optimize programs that unlock greater value for their existing customers. We also hope you enjoyed our last session, which was our ABM fireside chat, and learned a little bit how you can do more with your ABM program and strategy moving forward. Remember, start small and continue to iterate and learn. As a follow-up to today, we will be sending out an email with a recording of the event, as well as a link to a survey. Feedback is a gift, and we would love all of yours to ensure we can continue to evolve these events and make them meaningful to you. You should also see a quick poll now. It should have popped up on the right side of your screen. If you could take a few minutes just to complete that before you leave today, it would be greatly appreciated. So thank you again for your time today. On behalf of everybody here at LinkedIn, please enjoy the rest of your day.